Retention is often, I think, looked at as a compensation problem, right? People are leaving because they're not making enough money.
All of our operators are entitled to basically a week, and that's the 40 hours of development this year.
Technical skills can sometimes reign supreme in advanced manufacturing.
If you can invest in them, it's going to make implementation and change that much easier.
Good morning and welcome to this episode of Talent Talk. Today I am joined by Greg Janicik. He is a managing partner at DHR Global Talent Advisory Firm. Very excited, Greg, to pick your brain. You work with all sorts of industry partners, but focus a lot in the advanced manufacturing sector as it relates to talent strategies. So I know you have lots of great stories to share with us today, but Greg, I'd love for you to kind of introduce yourself to our audience.
Sure. So, hello, everyone. Greg Janicik. I have a 20 plus year career in leadership and organizational advisory. And the bulk of my clients over the years have been in the manufacturing space. In fact, even prior to consulting, my first job out of college was on the plant floor, and I was in marketing, but interacting with the technical side of the business. So it's just ingrained in me to think as we think about the future and how technology is impacting the business world, to pay close attention to how we focus on manufacturing and manufacturing operators. And I had a good fortune of also being a CHRO at a $5 billion materials company. And some of what I'll be talking about is from that experience, where I had the opportunity to not only transform HR, but to think about the future in terms of how we approached uh, the talent that we had in our manufacturing plants.
And that's one of many reasons I'm very excited for this conversation. I think your depth of experience, going deep in that CHRO role, as well as going wide, right, in the advisory role that you find yourself in today. Um, so some near and dear topics to both of us, I think that we're going to dive into today. We're going to think a lot about skills first hiring, skills first strategy as it relates to upskilling existing workforce, and really how a lot of these drive and support increased retention results, right, for different industry partners. So let's start with retention. I think this is one of the most frequently overlooked metrics, but man, is it a really important one, both for the TA team, but also, operations, right? Learning and development. Everyone really impacts this statistic. So let me take a step back. Retention is often, I think, looked at as a compensation problem, right? People are leaving because they're not making enough money. They're going to the guy across the street who pays 25 cents more an hour, right? So we hear that. But many manufacturers are finding that skills growth matters just as much. So tell me a little bit about how you use continuous upskilling and internal mobility programs to keep skilled talent engaged, and especially in this tight labor market.
That's a great question. And that was one of the challenges, just like other HR leaders in manufacturing industries. You would spend so much money, you know, onboarding a new manufacturing operator, getting them up to speed. The last thing you want was for them to leave after 6 months or a year. And thankfully, at the company I was at, we had some very loyal long-term uh, operators, but it was still a problem with the bulk of our operators, trying to get them, once we invested in them, to get them to stay. And when I first took the role, I did what any good CHRO does: is what data do we have that could inform this challenge? And interestingly, we did an engagement survey. A lot of companies do engagement surveys, but we had gotten feedback, especially over the last few years, that we're not doing anything with development. We're not doing anything in terms of building capability. And this wasn't isolated to our manufacturing operators. This was the commercial side, the functional support areas of the business. but I was really intrigued with the feedback from the manufacturing operators. And so I actually got my colleagues on the executive leadership team each to do a focus group. So we each went to different plants and talked to got a room full of operators and kind of talked to them, like what did they want to see? What were they interested in? What was holding them back? And where did they see the potential future opportunities with respect to learning and development? And we were shocked. We were driving a lot of change. We had just coming out of some cost cutting and there was a voluntary reduction. Thankfully we didn't really have to do many layoffs, but we had lost some operators. And so they were very anxious. But what they said was they wanted to be a part of the change. And so they were giving us feedback, help us give us skills on the soft side in terms of communication, influencing, because a lot of what they had to do was work across lines or interface with engineering, and that's where some of the bottlenecks were. And so they were asking for help in terms of correcting some of those organizational challenges. And then, like I'm sure you've heard from many of your members that, AI and technology, they wanted to make sure they weren't left behind. And so we got some very concrete feedback in terms of what was needed. And then our CEO did something really interesting. He said, I want all of our operators are entitled to basically a week, and that's the 40 hours of development this year, right? And you can't take it all at once, but we let the individual businesses figure out what types of programs could they set up and where did they want to focus. But it was almost like extra, on the job vacation. So they got time off the line if it was to focus on development. And that went over really well. And our engagement score and retention scores improved as well.
Well, it also puts a large dollar figure, for lack of a better phrase, to that investment, right? In their time and their professional growth and their long-term tenure and success. Um, and time off the line, I mean, that is precious, right? There's not many manufacturers that are willing to really do that, to reallocate schedules, to figure out how can we make this work? Because this is a priority to the people keeping the lights on, right?
That's right. Yes. And so a lot of my job was working with the supply chain leaders, across our businesses because that they had to manage it, right? We had capacity constraints and we had to fill our orders, but we were able to work it out so that again, everyone got hours sort of cascading over the course of the year. It didn't impact our output, but it did wonders in terms of building real capability where we needed it, and also just retention and higher engagement motivation across the line.
I'm curious, maybe you know the answer to this, maybe you don't. That's okay too. But with that example, did you see retention stay within the same role, or were you seeing then a push to reskill these people into other roles within the organization? What was the kind of talent flow talent flow outcomes that came from that?
Yeah. So while I was there, it's interesting. I kind of revamped some of the HR leadership roles, um, including talent acquisition. But I brought someone in who had experience with dynamic resourcing. And typically, the company I was at, we had always done that. We'd always said, okay, if there were openings, we would look internally. But we weren't proactive in terms of, well, this particular product line is growing faster. How do we take some of our manufacturing operators from this other line and cross train them and put them over there? So we uh, and it looked different, depending on which plant you were at, but we really got proactive in terms of finding the volunteers or uh, just, through this upskilling process, folks that had the skills that could move to another line and started, proactively moving people so that we can have cross training. And what happened when we eventually got rid of some SKUs and closed one of the lines down, we were able to use all of those manufacturing operators and find roles for them, and so that we didn't have to lay anyone off. And that I think was a first for our company because in the past, right, if you didn't have the skills to move over to another line, right, you're just out of a job. So it worked wonders.
That is amazing. And it builds so much trust from your frontline workforce, right? That you are thinking about them. And I imagine now with AI implementation, again, threatening a lot of different jobs, they're going to feel a different level of confidence that Gore in that instance is going to do right by them, right? I like how you said, was it dynamic resourcing? Was that the phrase you used?
Yes.
Did you make that up? Because I think it's beautiful.
No,
I,
no, I'm not an expert in it, but it and and now it's funny. One of the businesses is looking at, how do we take that same concept, with our junior engineers, right? Because it can be, once you get projects started, it can be hard to move people from one project to another. But there's a way that if you're continually looking at it and um, it's all about resource out, getting the right people on the right priorities. And we're trying to implement that across the board.
You have me thinking now. So, when we're thinking about dynamic resourcing, I'm going to keep using that phrase because I absolutely love it. In manufacturing, it is pretty volatile in terms of, being able to forecast appropriately, really understanding, how do you operationalize in the most efficient way possible, knowing that your volume is going to fluctuate and change based on tariffs or, you know, a million different kind of eco or like, macroeconomic environmental factors. That flexibility doesn't, you know, just happen right overnight. Like you have to know that that wave is coming and you're going to have to weather it in one way, shape, or form. And you've been able to kind of showcase that, manufacturing does depend on being agile, right? You have to figure that out, but it doesn't happen by accident, right?
Right. Yeah.
There are strategic decisions that leaders are making.
For skills. That's right. Because if our supply chain team, they do a great job measuring productivity and not having too much slack in terms of resources and people. And so, yeah, that's always been a mainstay of the function. But to your point, that's but with supply chain challenges over the past year, I mean, it started in COVID, but then, with the tariffs, we started literally having to think, well, do we move that line from Germany over to the US or vice versa? And if you're not upskilling your people, your operators, you can't do those kind of big moves because we'd have to hire a whole new team, right, to support that line if you're moving it from one country to another. So HR has to work hand in hand with supply chain to make that a reality.
One of the things I like about this concept of skills first hiring or skills based in job infrastructure, even, is it really opens the door to a lot of atypical or non traditional candidates that we've seen in the manufacturing workforce. But it also does require new thinking from leadership and frontline managers, right? If you are bringing in different talent pools that may not have 10 years of manufacturing experience, that's going to require a different cultural shift, right? And kind of openness. Tell me a little bit about how you've successfully made that transition, either within your own experience or with some of the clients that you work with at DHR.
Sure. Yeah, yeah. We took baby steps when I was a core because it is changing the whole way that you think about a role, right? Because you have a role description and you have certain experience you're looking for and specific skill sets. But now it's almost leveling it up a little bit and saying, to your point, we're less concerned about experience. You're really looking for these higher level skills, and will be the training to get to this, specificity of what you need to do online. But do they have A, B, and C skills in order to do the type of work we want them to do? And so the baby steps we took were just making sure that we could really get clarity with groups of roles on, they need A, B, and C in that type of role. Like that's the first step. With clients that I work with now, they're trying to first, and there are a lot of boutique, more AI consulting firms out there where you could do this a lot faster than even a few years ago, looking at their workforce and all of their operators and saying, well, what skills do we even have? And kind of collecting that data and then starting to say, geez, we have but a lot of this, but a dearth of something else. And that's what we need for the future. And so they're taking, I think what I'm helping my clients with now is, getting that data, and then deciding how do you take that and make strategic decisions on your workforce planning in terms of the type of uh, operators that you can hire that are going to benefit you in the future.
With skills first, with this kind of skills first move, are you also seeing value in terms of the soft skills? I think technical skills can sometimes reign supreme in advanced manufacturing. I'm hearing that there is just as much of a need to train people on, the soft skills or the power skills, right? Communication, punctuality, a lot of these other pieces that you're not necessarily getting in a traditional classroom environment, maybe, or maybe we've overlooked that kind of as a country in education, right? That's being woven into a lot more of the educational programs that we're seeing, and a lot more need and articulation around that by employers. I'm curious if that resonates with you.
Oh, yeah, definitely. And in fact, it's really interesting. So working with a few of my partners, because so many of our clients are thinking, they're looking at AI and automation, on the on the line, and how do we, train operators technically. But you touched on it in that technology isn't going to be the constraint and kind of the technical training. What our clients are telling us is that it's really um, the coordination, right? It's the ability to kind of work end to end, sort of have the people also communicate to your point, and coordinate effectively end to end, not only with each other, but now with robots and automation, so that it's an efficient process and everyone knows kind of what decisions get made where from a business, and manufacturing perspective. So yeah, what I see, a premium on now is, helping operators with communication and clarity in terms of decision making, and knowing when to say, something doesn't look right. I need to, let my manager know.
And that kind of brings us full circle, actually, back to your first point, right? Is that you engage with the frontline team. They said they care. They want to help, right? They want to figure out how do they escalate? How do they support the growth? How do they support by reskilling or whatever that might be for the larger good of the business? And so I think you're exactly right. It's like, how do we keep reinvesting in that population to keep rising, to keep, helping move these things forward and identify different stop gaps and things like that. And just they're asking for the tools, and you guys are delivering on that, which I think is so, so stellar. And I hope that more companies start to really understand that, people they want to do right by the organization. They want to have that commitment, but they want it to go both ways, right? They
That's right.
want to feel the investment too.
Absolutely. Like, they're very, and this was true, when I was at Core, and, when I go see my clients now, yeah, they're anxious. They don't know what's gonna happen with AI and the new technologies beyond that. But if you're transparent in investing in them and saying, "Well, the role for you, like, because you have these skills, there's a role for you. What you do may look different, and we'll figure it out." It just goes such a long way to kind of tamper down some of that anxiety, and they understand they understand the process and where the challenges are. If you can, invest in them, it's gonna make implementation and change that much easier.
Well said. I love that. Well, Greg, believe it or not, I could have this conversation all day, but our time is up. This was so, so insightful. I feel like you packed a lot of really great stories and intelligence into a quick 15-minute episode. So I thank you for your time. And Greg, if people are curious about the work that you're doing at DHR Global, what's the best way for them to get in contact with you?
Sure. So they can email me. It's, lowercase g Janicik, Janicik, at dhrglobal.com.
Or LinkedIn, right? You're also on
Oh, yeah, I'm
LinkedIn as
on
well.
LinkedIn. Yeah, just shoot me a note on LinkedIn, and, I always respond to messages.
Wonderful. Well, lovely getting to chat with you on this Friday. Thank you very much for taking the time, and we will see you on the next episode of Talent Talk.
Thanks, Becca. It was great to be here.